All right, so let's get some more perspective on President Barack Obama's visit to the country, the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, and some of the commitments that were made. We have Ambassador Dr. Monica Juma. She's the Principal Secretary in Interior. Thank you for joining us this evening, Madam. Before we get to the outcome of the meeting between the two presidents and the two administrations, I would like to get your perspective on the situation in Mogadishu this afternoon with that blast that took place there. Could you confirm to us, first of all, your reaction and the government's reaction to that, and then just talk to us about the situation there and whether the Kenyans are safe?
Well, thank you, Yvonne, for having me tonight. The situation in Mogadishu is correct. There was an IED explosion this afternoon. It was an explosion just outside the Hotel Al Jazeera, which hosts a number of embassies, including our own. This attack is a grim reminder to everybody across the world of the intentions of terrorism. But I wish to confirm first that all Kenyans are safe, the information we have. Of course, there were some buildings that were brought down, but they were not the hotel. Only part of the hotel was affected. It was not the immediate target. But as I have indicated, Kenyans are safe, and we have to understand that terrorist is a real threat to across the world, and particularly in Somalia.
Mm-hmm. All right, so all Kenyans are safe, and a lot of people are making, drawing conclusions between the timing of that attack and, you know, the presence of President Barack Obama here and the pledge by both presidents to continue to degrade Al-Shabaab within Somalia. Do you take this as one of those threats, trying to say, that's fine, you're having your conversations in Nairobi about what you're going to do to Al-Shabaab? Do you think this is a reaction to the president's visit?
Not at all. I mean, this is not the only attack we have seen in Mogadishu, certainly not even in recent times. And I do not think that it is necessarily targeting Kenyans. It's probably true that more Somalis have been affected and by this attack than any other nationality. So that parallel is somewhat spurious. We are not the only country with embassies in this location, so I think it is not correct to assume that this was a response in any way to the visit of President Obama in the region. But nonetheless, I think what it does tell us is that Somalia is still fragile. Even though the Al-Shabaab has been degraded significantly, they still have the capacity to cause harm and mayhem.
All right, and let's talk about the talks and the outcome of that. President Barack Obama saying they will walk shoulder to shoulder with Kenya in the war on terror and pledged more money. Are you able to give us some specifics about the level of cooperation that has now been pledged going forward in the war on terror in the country?
Well, Yvonne, I think, first of all, may I say that this was a historic, successful visit. We are exhausted but very pleased. I also have to begin by commending our security officers for a splendid job for the last 3 days. In fact, some of them have received personal commendation from President Obama. And so we at the Ministry of Interior are most pleased with the manner in which this operation was executed. You will recall that General Ngaiseri addressed the nation on Thursday and promised that he was going to deliver a secure visit. That is what we have done, and we are very, very proud of our officers. Now, there were a number of deals secured during the visit, and one of them, of course, spoke to the question of security. We did sign an agreement around the Security Governance Initiative, which focuses on the enhanced management of our border, because we recognize that our border is one of the most vulnerable points. Our intelligence have been showing us a greater appetite for crossing in small numbers, and part of that is because we have had a very porous long border. And so part of that agreement is going to help us create a more robust border management system and structures, and we look forward to that cooperation. So that is one of the specific outcomes that has come out of this area. The second one, as it relates to security, has to deal with terrorism. Now, America has been one of our most dependable partners in the war on terror. And you will know, since Westgate, there has been those of us who are working in this area appreciate the improvement in terms of interagency coordination, in terms of intelligence sharing, in terms of preventive action. And so both presidents spoke to and committed to enhanced cooperation in all these areas, including training and increasing our capability to deal with what is an asymmetrical war. Thirdly, we have also been elaborating a strategy on counter-violent extremism. You will probably know only last month we hosted a most successful regional summit that brought together delegations, over 500 of them from 22 countries across the globe, and we have elaborated and finalized our counter-violent extremism strategy. Again, this is an area where we are looking for some concrete commitment that has been given to us by the Americans in terms of rolling this strategy through. So some very significant commitments out there.
All right. President Barack Obama also talked about marginalization and exclusion of minority communities, even making comparisons with how they were able to make attempts at healing the rift between the U.S. government and the Muslim community in the United States. And he pointed out that extrajudicial killings are counterproductive in the war on terror. We've seen in this country clerics in Mombasa disappearing. We've seen disappearances, several family members in various parts of the northern rift of this country, talking about profiling, talking about their loved ones going missing. I'd just like your comments on that.
Well, you will probably know, Yvonne, that you've also seen a group of 85 Kenyans that have returned. Those had also been defined as having disappeared. We have Kenyans that are leaving this country to train in Somalia, to fight in other areas, and we actually have been in a very deep discussion about foreign fighters. It is one of the big issues, and that is why you have had the government issue an amnesty. You have had us calling for parents to report if kids go missing, and we have had people that have gone missing and come back to actually operate or organize or undertake an operation against us. So this is not about extrajudicial this, extrajudicial that. Actually, as a matter of fact, since January, we've not had any such case. But I think we've had repeated stories that keep being repeated without any fact. What we have seen is that police officers, security officers have been targeted repeatedly. And so what the issue here, and what President Obama was saying in that discussion, which was quite interactive, I have to say, was how do we improve Kenya and America, in fact, because this is not just a Kenyan problem, it's not a regional problem, it's a global problem. And this discussion is going on across the globe. How do we improve our capacity to include everybody in a way that they can contribute to securing their nation and their spaces, as communities, as regions, as countries, and as the world? And so this is the context within which this discussion took place. And frankly, there were no issues around extrajudicial killings. I don't know where this has come from.
How about the perception of certain communities feeling left out or targeted in the war on corruption? Residents of Isili will continue to complain about them being targeted every time there's an attack. Could you speak to that? It may be a perception, but rightfully so. Could you speak to that about assuring them that they will be included in the war on terror rather than the targets of it?
Not that they will be included. We've already begun to do that. As a matter of fact, if you look at places where we piloted, like in Mombasa, you will remember that a number of mosques in Mombasa had actually been taken by very radical young clerics. And it took the cooperation between the government and the community to actually flush out these radical clerics and to take over what had been taken away from them. So this is not something we are going to begin. It is something that is going on, and what we are thinking about is how to scale it. It's how to scale it. Now, Isili keeps coming up. Every time you have a discussion a little bit, you know, Isili this, Isili that.
Right, yeah.
May I confirm here that since we had that operation on Isili, which flushed out many thousands of aliens that had no documentation, we returned some were refugees that were in the town without any permission, in view of the procedures that are required, and are returned back to the camps. Can I confirm that Nairobi has not had an attack? because that is the fact. So I think we need to roll this over into the what is the fact on the ground. And I think we have to just move away from these narratives that are really almost spurious to a certain degree. You know, and this question about marginalization, we've moved on this country. If you look at the way the structures, whether it is the devolution, whether it is the level of participation, whether it is in terms of the resources that are being devolved, you know, and I think we need to interrogate fact rather than perception.
All right. Let's move to the president's trip now to Ethiopia, and President Uhuru Kenyatta is also going to be part of that delegation and part of those discussions that he will be having there. You've had extensive experience within the AU. Talk to us about the significance, first of all, of President Barack Obama going to the AU headquarters, being the first sitting American president to do so. How significant is that moment for the African Union?
It is most significant. When I was at the African Union, I remember us waiting and hoping that President Baraka would grace the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the African Union. It didn't pass because of a number of reasons, and so I mean it is a moment that has been waited by Africa for a long time. And how historic could it be that this sitting American president happens to be an African that has a great passion for Pan-African ideals, that believes that Africa is the next frontier of global growth, that believes that the drive for the next growth in the world must be African. I mean, it cannot be more significant. But from our region, I think what makes it even more significant is to bring the gravitas of America to questions around the Horn of Africa stability. This is important for us as Kenya because the potential of realizing the growth that is embedded in our progress, our democratic progress, it can only be realized if the region is also stable.
All right. So talking about stability, he's also going to be hosting, you know, a meeting to discuss the crisis in Burundi and also in South Sudan. Many humanitarian organizations were hoping he would take a tougher stance on the situation in Burundi, but then again we see the direction that America is taking, saying Africa needs to run its own affairs. And so the question is, what more can Kenya do in the crisis in Burundi? Kenya is the economic powerhouse of the region and perhaps the most politically stable at the moment. But what more can Kenya do to bring perhaps Pierre Nkurunziza to the negotiating table?
Well, I think, well, you know, the foreign affairs has been seized of this matter, and they still are. Our role in the region has been significant. We have always, in this administration, taken a lead role, as you know. The East African countries have been seized of this question. They had a position that preferred a postponement of the election. Now that we are where we are, I think people are beginning to ask the question, how do you make sure that this does not degenerate into a crisis? And that is an important question for Kenya and for the Ministry of Interior, because we are almost the natural host country if there is something going wrong.
That's right.
And so we are looking carefully to the discussions tomorrow in the hope that we can strike a balance out of that meeting that enables Burundi to stabilize and to move forward in a way that is more inclusive. We've been there before, and we know it can happen. So our biggest role, I think, as a country is really to continue nudging for Burundians to resolve this matter, because no matter how much you would want to do it for them, Burundians must be on the driver's seat.
All right, talk to us a bit about South Sudan. We know the term for the president came to an end, and we know of, you know, the threats and saying he needs to step down and we need to you know, come to some sort of agreement. What is your take on South Sudan? I mean, Kenya played an important role in the nation that is South Sudan today.
I think every Kenyan feels quite downbeat, really, by the development in South Sudan. And those of us that were in the forefront in terms of the process that brought this new country to birth feel somewhat disappointed. Having said that, though, I think the next point is really to figure out how to help this nation again to move forward. And again, as a country, we have been engaged. There are negotiations, very intense negotiations been going on. Our own president has managed to bring both parties together to negotiate an agreement. So there is something that we are hopeful can help them forge forward as well. But it is my hope that the situation can be resolved and that the people of South Sudan can enjoy the freedom and peace that we all know benefits the potential of every one of us.
All right, I'm sure they're watching us tonight and hoping for the same as well. Just to get your closing comments, Ambassador, about what happens tomorrow, because the question we're all asking ourselves is President Barack Obama has now left. We know he has arrived in Ethiopia. Just about following up on the momentum, the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, of the commitments that you're saying he's made and his administration has made in helping Kenya in the war on terror. Just talk to us about how we sustain this conversation starting tomorrow and in the days and weeks to come.
Well, what President Obama's visit has done is to really accelerate the momentum. Work was going on, and now we are on a high. I can tell you, I leave tomorrow with a team to Rome for the preparatory meeting of the high-level meeting in New York on countering violent extremism. We are already discussing modalities for implementing our strategy. Our teams on border management are already in training. So it is just the momentum is there, and we feel quite pleased that there has been an all-round endorsement of this visit by both heads of state. So those of us that have been working on it feel quite pleased and ready to go.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Ambassador Monica Juma, she's the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Interior, talking to us about President Barack Obama's visit, and we've managed to talk about a number of issues, including the situation in Mogadishu tonight. John Alanamu has some further updates for us. John?